This story is about a human dragged into an alien med bay, bleeding glowing blue fluid that triggers a full-scale biohazard lockdown. When the medbay doors of the Sithari cruiser Tavrak's Echo slammed open, a sharp metallic clang echoed through the sterile chamber. Drelith barely lifted 2 of his 6 eyes from the neurosuture he was adjusting on a groaning Tigrian patient. The noise was familiar. Panic. Chaos. Possibly another poorly supervised plasma torch incident, typical humans. Then, he smelled it. Not the usual blood-ozone mix, but something metallic with an odd undercurrent of citrus and coolant. A strange odor that fizzed faintly at the edges of his olfactory receptors like static discharge. The 2 crew techs hauling the half-conscious human were babbling incoherently in Sithari dialect, but Dralith's attention was rooted on the puddle forming beneath the stretcher. It shimmered, cobalt blue, iridescent, almost glowing. "Back! Everyone back!" Drelith's scalpel clattered to the floor. With a panicked jab at his emergency panel, he triggered quarantine protocols. Yellow strobes pulsed from the ceiling. Barriers hissed into place. Sterile mist began flooding the chamber as 3 wall panels slid aside to reveal squat, spider-legged quarantine drones, primed for Level 7 containment. "Put him down and get clear!" Drelith shrieked, his voice pitching into frequencies only half the crew could actually hear. The stretcher clattered onto a diagnostic slab. One of the crew techs slipped in the fluid, skidding awkwardly and hitting the floor with a yelp, his legs instantly smeared in blue. Drelith stumbled back, already yanking on his hazmat suit. "He's infected with something terrifyingly advanced. That color, that consistency, no biological fluid behaves like—" Then the human groaned. A low rattling noise, gurgling through cracked lips as his head lolled to the side. His eyelids fluttered. One eye blinked open. It tracked the chaos vaguely before settling on Dralith, whose claws were fumbling with an isolation field generator. "Nah, bro," the human slurred. "That's my coolant-blood. Had a swap. 5 years ago. Long story." The silence was immediate and oppressive. Even the drones paused, their nozzles hovering an inch from deployment. Dralith straightened slowly. "You replaced your blood?" The human grinned weakly. "Thermal optimization. Nanofluidic composite. Keeps my core temp stable. Also glows when I get real stressed, apparently. Forgot about that." Dralith stared. His rear legs collapsed beneath him in a posture of horrified resignation. The human's vitals were coming online now. Name, Derek Collins. Species, Homo sapiens. Status, mild thermal burns, stress exhaustion, and foreign chemical agent. Type R49A. Flagged. Non-lethal cosmetic nanofluid. "What does that even mean?" Drelith hissed, tapping the screen with increasing frustration. The readout was flashing warnings, but every field seemed overridden by the same ridiculous flag, and one kept translating his spleen as exotic candy fruit. The drones retreated. The mist hissed away. Dralith's hands were still shaking. Derek coughed, sending a fine blue mist into the air. "You got any water?" "You were melting," Drelith said blankly. Yeah. That checks out." The door buzzed again. This time, a Sithari officer leaned in, surveying the scene and the now largely stabilized human with a mixture of alarm and exasperation. "I've filed a planetary emergency request," Drelith said hoarsely. "I thought we had a contagion, possibly a cross-dimensional leak." "Yeah, sorry about that," Derek muttered. "Guess I forgot to log the fluid mod when I transferred to this sector. Been a wild week." "What are you?" Derek groaned and shifted, peeling off a layer of melted thermal mesh from his shoulder. It sizzled as it hit the floor. "Just a guy who took a bet too seriously. You ever hear of Doc 92? No. Then you wouldn't know about the Thermal God Challenge. It's this stupid contest. Bet was I couldn't survive drinking lava. Not actual lava, more like a molten slurry composite with similar heat characteristics. They give you a cup and a 10-second countdown. You drank lava? Almost," Derek muttered. That was the plan. Got through the prep, had the nanofluid transfusion, trained my core regulation and heat shock proteins, even paid some lunatic to coat my esophagus with a temporary silicone sheath. Everything was on track. But then the contest got postponed, political thing. Diplomats were visiting, never got my moment. Drelith stared at the puddle of blue spreading toward his favorite surgical drone. You did all this to win a nickname? It was thermal god, Derek said defensively. You don't just ignore that opportunity. Another drone skidded slightly as its sensors misread the puddle as biohazard level 10. Drelith sighed, pinched the bridge of his nasal ridge, and muttered something impolite in his native tongue. "And this fluid," he said finally. "It's safe?" "Yeah, mostly. Had some side effects. Occasionally makes scanners glitch. Turns my lymph nodes into emergency coolant nodes on some readouts. Oh, and my spleen shows up as candy fruit. Don't eat it, by the way." "I wasn't planning to." The medical scanner pinged again. This time, it listed his pancreas as soft tissue thermal battery, vintage. Drelith turned the screen off. Derek adjusted himself on the table with a wince. "Might need a little help, though. I think I fractured something when I fell off the scaffold." "You fell onto molten alloy plating." "Yeah. Heat wave from the turbine arc knocked me sideways." Drelith looked down at his own soaked torso, now tinted faintly blue. "I summoned 3 strike teams," he said again, voice hollow, "and I appreciate your enthusiasm. You're banned from the medbay until I install a custom scanner profile," Drelith snapped, "and possibly a shock collar." Derek gave a thumbs up before passing out. Drelith stared at him, then at the puddle still glowing under the diagnostic lights. The techs were backing away again, murmuring about needing new boots. This wasn't over, not even close. But first, he needed a decontamination shower. A long one. The next morning began with an apology from the planetary governor and an invoice for misallocated emergency resources, totaling 16 million creds. Drelith signed it with a trembling appendage while staring at the line item labeled False Catastrophe Xenocontagion. Humanoid origin unfounded. In Medbay 2, Derek Collins was sleeping like he just invented the concept. A light snore, one arm bandaged, the other loosely cuffed to prevent him from wandering into dangerous machinery, as Drelith had tactfully phrased it. The human's vitals were stabilized. His core temperature was within Earth-normal range, even factoring in the synthetic nanofluid running through his circulatory system. Recovery time, if no further stupidity occurred, was projected at 2 to 3 weeks for the thermal burns and bruising. The cracked rib would take 6 to 8 weeks to fully mend, assuming Derek didn't cough too hard. Unfortunately, the no further stupidity clause failed within 12 hours. It started with a scream. Drelith, barely halfway through recalibrating the DNA recompiler, dropped his nutrient tea and bolted into the diagnostics bay. What now? 2 nurses were pressed against the wall, eyes locked on Derek, who was calmly examining a holographic diagram of his liver. The scanner had updated again, now claiming the organ was a stabilized crystalloid containment unit, peppermint flavor. "I didn't touch anything," Derek said quickly. "I just asked it to show me my liver." The scanner, of course, had also triggered a soft emergency tone, a blue one. The color coding was causing no end of confusion. Drelith stomped across the room and smacked the override with a heavy claw. The display vanished. The peppermint flavor label lingered half a second too long. "You are banned from touching anything," Drelith snarled. "I was bored. You've suffered partial dermal melting, blunt force trauma, and your blood is literally based on machine coolant. You are not bored. You are resting." Derek leaned back with a sigh, wincing. All right. Just can I get something to read? Or a game pad? I've got at least 3 days in here before my skin stops itching like crazy." Drelith jabbed at his datapad. "I will send you a list of approved activities that do not require movement, interaction, or creative thought." "Sounds fun. Don't make me sedate you." By the end of day 2, the glitch had spread. Not biologically. Dralith had run over 50 samples and concluded with great relief that the nanofluid was completely contained and non-replicating. But digitally, every scanner within proximity of Derek began showing odd inconsistencies. The thermal reader in cryostorage reported sunset-colored emotions in a block of frozen lizard meat. The diagnostic wand labeled a fire extinguisher as emergency popsicle. Derek, of course, found it hilarious. Dralith did not. This is not a joke. This is systemic corruption of vital equipment. Look, you want me to apologize that I paid a shady Martian clinic for an illegal bloodstream overhaul just to win a lava-drinking bet? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm also extremely flammable now, so I think we're even. You are not flammable. You were nearly incinerated. Well, yeah, but I didn't burn. That's the mod working. You still fractured a rib, damaged 3 dermal layers, and rendered an entire medbay incompatible with standard interface modules. Which, to be fair, nobody else did this cycle. Dralith nearly turned off his translator. Instead, he arranged a field team to recalibrate the entire diagnostic network and personally requested a Type 9 digital filter, the kind usually reserved for anomalous energy beings or abstract AI sculptures. By day 4, Derek was mobile, limping, wrapped in a light cooling wrap, but out of bed. His first act was to wander into engineering with a makeshift ID badge made of snack wrappers and duct tape, claiming he was there to study heat dispersion zones for future lava endeavors. Dralith found him on top of a subreactor. I warned you not to exert yourself. Technically, I'm just observing. No exertion. You're bleeding blue again. Yeah, stress glow, you yelling at me kinda does that. You're contaminating the reactor. Nah, nanofluid's sealed. It only leaks under traumatic injury or intense pressure. You fell off a scaffold yesterday. Yeah, but that was from like 6 feet. Totally manageable. 6 meters. See? I'm adapting. Dralith dragged him back to Medbay 2 and ordered a double confinement field. But then came the Admiral. Her name was Sane Trican, a polished Avanthi with ceremonial facial fronds and an expression of permanent distrust. She arrived unannounced, trailed by 2 diplomatic aides and a sanitation officer. We received word of a human exhibiting anomalous biological warfare traits, she said flatly, peering at Derek, who waved weakly from behind a translucent barrier. False alarm, Dralith said quickly. False biological flags due to synthetic blood composition and nanofluidic cross-interference. I want confirmation from your central records. They are still recalibrating the database, he admitted. The fluid interfered with over 20 medical protocols. Trican turned. This was an intentional body modification? Derek raised a hand. To win a stupid title, yeah. You jeopardized an entire vessel's safety for sport? Well, technically for legend status, title comes with perks. You'll be transferred to Station 9 for full biological review and held until confirmed harmless. Oh, come on. That is not negotiable. Great. I'm going to be locked in a tube for another month. Maybe then you'll reflect on your choices, Dralith muttered. The Admiral glanced at the containment logs, then back to Derek's readout. His spleen is still labeled as candy fruit. I'm aware. You're lucky this wasn't war. I'm unlucky because it wasn't, Derek muttered. Dralith massaged his cranial plates. By day 5, the story had spread across 3 sectors. Blue Blood Thermogod trended on station feeds, complete with fan art. A betting pool started on whether Derek would try a second lava stunt. Several humans submitted applications to the same illegal clinic. And Dralith? He quietly installed a new rule in the medbay. No admittance without a valid blood certification. It was, he thought grimly, probably too late. By the start of the 2nd week, Dralith had developed a chronic tremor in his upper left arm. His medical assistant blamed stress. He blamed Derek Collins. The human was no longer confined, technically. Admiral Trican had authorized monitored roaming under the condition that he wear a biotag collar and avoid unshielded infrastructure. Derek wore it like a party accessory, and immediately wandered into a coolant maintenance shaft, just to see how it compared to his bloodstream. He was dragged out by 2 engineers and a very angry sanitation drone. "Why?" Drylith demanded. "Do you insist on exploring every environment that can melt you?" "Call it professional curiosity," Derek said. "Also, I got stuck trying to retrieve a dropped spoon." "You were eating in the coolant shaft?" "No, I dropped it 3 days ago and remembered it today." Drylith breathed in through his nose vents. "Your rib is still healing. Your dermis hasn't finished regenerating, and you're actively leaking through your elbow joint." Derek looked. "Oh, huh. That's new." The nanofluid shimmered gently down his forearm. Another cleanup protocol activated. At least the medical scanner had stopped calling his organs candy. Now it just defaulted to ambiguous structures, do not ingest. The engineers had installed a hard-coded firewall around Derek's biosignature. Every scanner now issued a warning before displaying his vitals. Most just refused to try. But the problems had started spreading again, not to hardware, but to the crew. Ensign Pev, a reptilian mechanic with no history of psychosomatic symptoms, fainted after sharing a lift with Derek for 6 minutes. He claimed he saw his own blood fluorescing in sympathy. There was no medical evidence, but it started a rumor that Derek's nanofluid was contagious. The rumor reached command. A security lockdown followed. Derek was called in for a psychological evaluation. "You're not helping your case," the counselor said after 10 minutes of Derek recounting the full lava drinking bet, the 8-month training regimen, and the clandestine surgery conducted in a Martian asteroid dock that smelled like old socks and coolant. "Helping with what?" Derek asked. "Convincing us you're not a hazard." "I'm not. I mean, sure, my blood's unnatural, and yeah, scanners around me hallucinate weird metadata, but I'm stable. Mostly. At least my organs stopped renaming themselves last week. We can't verify that without a clean scan." "Then use a thermal camera." "They melted last time." Drylith reviewed the evaluation and scribbled a note in the margin. "Patient shows chronic impulsivity and irreverent behavior under medical stress. Also has concerning affinity for molten substances." The Admiral wasn't satisfied. "This is a containment issue," Trican said in the next command meeting. "I've had 4 civilian ships rerouted due to panic. One claimed Derek's image caused their AI to have a philosophical crisis." "That was a satire feed," Drylith muttered. "And yet our central systems still list him as a Category 3 anomaly. Because the scanner thinks his pancreas is a capacitor array. It's labeled hot pudding unit now." Drylith winced. "We're updating daily." "Not fast enough. There's talk of ejecting him planetside." "He'd melt half the medical grid," Drylith said. "Also, he's still injured. That cracked rib hasn't fully fused. The dermal regrowth isn't done. He needs another 2 weeks, minimum." The Admiral tapped her claws on the table. "Then isolate him." Which is how Derek ended up in a floating medical isolation pod orbiting the ship, tethered by a reinforced magnetic lock and a permanent connection to a filtered comm line. "This feels a little excessive," Derek said on day 10. "Like, I get I'm weird, but I'm not contagious." "You are chaotic," Drylith replied through the monitor. "And your nanofluid emits particles that confuse even shielding. It's just static shimmer, makes me sparkle. You should have seen me on New Year's." "I should have never seen you." Derek adjusted the narrow cot inside his pod. "How long are we doing this?" "Until the crew stops fainting." "People faint when they see me?" 3 so far." "Well, that's flattering at least." "Your confidence is unkillable." "That's the fluid talking." Drylith muted the mic for a moment to scream into a towel. But isolation brought results. Derek's vitals stabilized. The scanners began showing consistent readings. Still weird, but consistent. The diagnostic interference dropped by 63%. The pod, sealed and insulated, prevented external electromagnetic bleed. And for the first time in days, no new items were labeled consumable candy fruit. Then came day 12. A cargo vessel docked with a coolant shipment. Routine, standard delivery, until one of the containers ruptured during offload. The spill wasn't toxic, but the coolant, a pale blue composite, glowed under stress. It spread across the deck in slow pulses. Alarms triggered. 3 departments panicked. A broadcast blared. IM 409 biofluid detected. Possible anomaly breach. Dralith sprinted to the scene, nearly slipped in the puddle, and shouted, "It's not him! He's in space! This is a coolant spill!" "But it's blue!" someone screamed. A technician pointed at the puddle. "It's moving, it's shimmering." "That's because it's under pressure." A sanitation drone, unfamiliar with the updated protocols, sprayed fire suppressant. 2 consoles shorted out. Dralith stepped into the puddle, held up both hands, and yelled, "This is just coolant. Derek Collins is not here. He did not cause this." There was silence, finally. But then, the intercom crackled. Derek's voice piped in. "Hey Doc, you okay? I heard the coolant spill. Sounds like my legacy's alive and well." Dralith looked at the ceiling. "I will jettison your pod into a sun. You'd miss me. You'd infect the sun. Then I'd be a god twice." Dralith hung up. Later that night, after verifying no crew had passed out and all fluids were accounted for, he logged an official request to transfer Derek to Earth's Experimental Physiology Center for permanent evaluation. Status: pending. The transfer was approved at dawn on day 15. A specialized Earthside medical retrieval craft arrived with 2 physicians, both graying and too calm like they'd seen worse, and learned not to ask. Dralith envied them. "I reviewed the report," said Dr. Selena Grant as she inspected Derek's orbiting pod through the magnetic tether viewport. "Frankly, this looks like a containment unit for volatile cargo. It was either this or seal him in the ship's airlock with a mop," Dralith replied. Dr. Grant raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" "The scans began identifying emotional states in nearby furniture," Dralith said. "One chair was labeled melancholic but flammable." "I see." Inside the pod, Derek had decorated. Sort of. There were 5 sticky notes, 3 motivational, 1 warning about where not to sit, and the last simply read, "Lava King lives." He beamed when the transfer team arrived. "You guys Earthside?" "Yes," Dr. Grant said. "We're from the Advanced Experimental Physiology Institute. We'll be overseeing your debrief, neural assessment, and full-spectrum metabolic profiling." Derek gave a thumbs up. "Awesome. Do I get to keep the blue blood, or is this one of those revert-to-baseline situations?" "That depends on the risk factors." "Hope not. It's been kinda growing on me. Makes my night jogs a light show." Dralith stayed quiet through most of the transfer process. He ran a final diagnostic, checked for fluid pressure irregularities, and ensured Derek's rib had fully healed. Dermal regeneration was complete. Muscle density within 98% of baseline. In any other patient, this would be a success. "Your bloodstream still registers as an experimental synthetic compound not recognized by 9 major interstellar treaties," Dralith said as he handed over the records, "and you remain banned from my medbay." Derek extended his hand. "Fair enough, no hard feelings?" Dralith stared at the stained blue smear still present on the threshold of the quarantine zone. "I will require decades of therapy." "Therapy's good for you. Highly recommend it." He shook Derek's hand, reluctantly. It tingled. Mild static charge from the nanofluid's residual electromagnetic profile. Nothing dangerous, just like always. Just like never. The Earthside medics magnetically secured Derek's pod to their transport vessel. As it pulled away, tether retracting with a faint hum, Derek pressed a palm to the glass. "Thanks for patching me up, Doc. You're not bad for someone who thinks candy fruit is a spleen." "I never thought that." "Not even once?" "I screamed when I saw it." A classic first reaction. And then he was gone. Back inside the ship, the tension evaporated like vented oxygen. The medbay stopped mislabeling diagnostic charts. The scanners hummed in their normal tones. The emergency protocols returned to green. A week passed. And 2. No blue puddles. No anomalous scan results. No candy fruit. Drelith was finally beginning to sleep again. Until the message came. It was short, time-stamped 3 weeks after Derek's departure. Subject: status update. Patient Derek Collins. Patient currently stable, nanofluidic bloodstream showing remarkable thermal resistance and cellular adaptation. Scanner errors persist but are now isolated to humorous mislabels. He recently ran a 5K in 104 DGF heat and only glowed faintly at the finish line. Says he's training for the lava bowl. We do not know what that is. Will advise. Dralith forwarded the message to the Admiral with a single note. If he ever returns, initiate quarantine protocol before he speaks. But secretly, he allowed himself the smallest sigh of amusement. Humanity, he had decided, wasn't dangerous because of its weapons or ships or politics. It was dangerous because of Derek Collins. And people like him, people who swapped out their blood just to win a title, broke medical equipment with their sheer absurdity, and glowed under stress like it was an achievement, those were the ones who changed the universe in the most inconvenient ways possible. When the Admiral passed Dralith in the corridor days later, she asked, "Did you ever find out why the scanner called his spleen a candy fruit?" "No," Dralith said, "and I refuse to ask." She nodded once. Wise. They never saw Derek Collins again on the Tavrak's Echo. But the glow-in-the-dark warning posters went up in 6 departments. Just in case.